はい、こといです。ザ・スタンリー・パラボをウルトラデラックス元いスタンリー・パラボ2遊んでまいります。よろしくお願いいたします。ウルトラデラックス内でナレーターさんがウルトラデラックスクソだから2作ってやるぜと意気込んでおりまして、どうやらこれがその2らしいです。では早速遊んでまいりましょう。よろしくお願いいたします。本当に2なんかな。
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427.
同じだね、今のとこ。
Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order.This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy.
はい。
And then one day, something very peculiar happened.
お、2だ。
Something that would forever change Stanley.Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid,Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
よし、行くぞ。
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. Stanley picked up the bucket.
バケツ以外は同じだな。
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left.
嫌だ。
This was not the correct way to the meeting room, but Stanley had felt the bucket calling to him, telling him that the employee lounge was simply the place to be. And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? Was this better than the meeting room? Yes, Stanley thought. No.Never mind. The bucket was wrong. Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
やだ。
No,
said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift, yes. Go there. Good,
said the bucket.
Now ride the lift all the way to the top. There's something up there I need you to do.
Stanley did not question why or how this bucket was speaking to him.It should have alarmed him, of course, because buckets can't talk. But Stanley chose not to think about this obvious fact. He was firmly convinced that the bucket had spoken to him, and he unthinkingly did whatever the bucket asked.
いや、やらないよ。あれ？ナレーター死んだ？
No, stop.Look there on the wall, you see? There's a sign right there. It says, no buckets past this point. Stanley, how could you think it was okay to bring the bucket here? Unless...
本当だ。
What if the problem is that you actually don't know what is a bucket and what isn't a bucket? I suppose that would explain a lot about your behavior up to this point. Which, if that's true, well, my goodness.
No bucket.
I think we have to do something about it.This misunderstanding could have dire consequences on the entire rest of the game if not addressed quickly and properly. So much of the impact of the story is dependent on your understanding of what is and isn't a bucket. Please, step in here for a moment. Now then.I'm going to run you through some test scenarios, and you'll tell me whether or not the thing I'm showing you is a bucket. Simple enough, right? This should tell us everything we'll ever need to know about what is or is not a bucket. Okay, let's begin. Item 1. Is this a bucket?
はい。
Incorrect.
Eh?
It is a hologram of a bucket, not an actual
は
bucket.
意味わかんない。
Item 2. Is this a bucket?
はい。
Incorrect. It is a 3D printed recreation of a bucket, not an
こ
actual
っから先
bucket.
に進めないクソ。殴らせろナレーターを。
Item 3. Is this a bucket?
もう合って
Correct.
た。
This is a bucket.
なんだ、This is a pen みたいなことさせるじゃん。まだあんの？
Item 4. Is this a bucket?
トラクターでしょ？
Correct. This is a tractor and not a
え、バカ
bucket.
にされてる？
To be honest, I just sort of put this one in here as a gimme, but I was starting to get concerned that even this might be too much for you. Thank you for not making me look like an idiot. Okay, next one.
え、まだ続くのこれ。
Is this a bucket? Incorrect. This is a bucket.
は？あ？正気？
Item 6. Is this a bucket? Trick question. Both. Gotcha.
え？苦痛すぎるよ。
Item. Wait, hold on. I can't find the next one. Let me see. Should be around here
いらないいら
somewhere.
ないいらないいらない。僕を外に出してくれ。
Yes. Thank you. There's nothing here. Of course it isn't a bucket. We both know full well that nothing isn't a bucket. Wait, when I say nothing isn't a bucket, that makes it sound like I'm saying everything is a bucket, which of course is not true. Unless, is that what you think? Answer me straight, Stanley. Are you trying to tell me that you believe everything is a bucket? You know what? I'm too confused to even sort it out.
バケツ
I've lost all sense of perspective. What is a bucket? What isn't a bucket? Mere moments ago I could answer these questions with confidence. And yet now I'm somewhat adrift. Do any of us know what a bucket is? Am I a bucket?
私はバケツなのでしょうかって
Stanley, I can't
新しい
keep
な。
doing this. I'm losing myself, and myself was all I ever had to begin with. I'm afraid the bucket is threatening to tear our relationship apart.
いや、バケ
I
ツを
can't
導
have
入した
that.
のは
I'm
ナレーター
sorry,
じゃない。
but I'm going to erase all buckets from the game entirely.
え、怖っ。
Okay, here we go.
え？
What happened? Is everything gone? Why did everything disappear? Wait, was everything a bucket? Every single thing in the game was a
このゲー
bucket.
ムはバケツしかなか
My
ったのか。
God, I had no
新しい
idea.
な。
How could... Except me. I'm not a bucket after all. And you, Stanley, you're still here. You're not a bucket either. Oh, this is wonderful news. We're not buckets. Yes, I actually feel much more at ease right now. It's delightful to get some clarity on that issue. But it doesn't change the fact that we haven't got a game. So, tell you what. I'll reset everything and we'll put back all of the buckets, okay? And we'll know that it's all a bucket. But if you run into anyone else, maybe don't mention that. Who knows what that information might do to a person? All right, here we go.
すべてがバケツになるってこと？あ、電話だ。
Good morning. Thank you for contacting the Future Happiness Foundation. We are confirming your shipment of 1,327 cardboard boxes to your place of work. Can you verify that this is correct? Excellent. Your order will arrive shortly. Thank you again for contacting the Future Happiness Foundation.
なんか良い未来の財団かなんかが大量に荷物送ってくるらしいよ。バケツだ。
Stanley lifted the bucket into his arms, and a wave of comfort rushed over him.
すべてがバケツになる。
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest. This was not the correct way to the meeting room, but Stanley had felt the bucket calling to him, telling him that the employee lounge was simply the place to be. And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? Was this better than the meeting room? Yes, No, never mind. The bucket was wrong. Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
どうしよっか。ここさっきから何度も来てるんだよね。
No,
said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift, yes. Go there. Go to the cargo lift.
待って、なんかあるんだけど。行きたいな、あっち。あ、行ける。コレクションアイテムだ。
You found one of them. One of the miniature Stanley figurines. Remember, no reward for collecting all of these, only the intrinsic pleasure of a job well done. You can't buy that sort of happiness, Stanley. God knows I've tried. So, I implore you to savor each and every moment you come across one of these beautiful figurines.
はい。よし。で、こっからどうすんだ？落ちて死ぬ？
But Stanley feared that any path he walked might lead to the separation of himself and the bucket, his dearest friend. So he threw himself to his death, that they might die in one
だって
another's
出口なかった
arms.
よ。
How deeply touching.
あ、元に戻ればよかったのか。
All of his co-workers were... Wait, no. This isn't the right office, is it?
え？
Is this Stanley's office?
急に哲学的なこと言うやん。
Where are we going today? The bucket asked. Stanley just smiled. Anywhere they went together would be perfect. Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his... This was not the correct way to the meeting room, but Stanley had felt the bucket calling to him, telling him that the employee lounge was simply the place to be. And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? No, never mind. The bucket was wrong. Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
No,
Said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift, yes. Go there. Go to the cargo lift.
ここに来たかった。よいしょ。これ。さっき見つけたんですよ。おー、来た来た来た来た。知らないとこ来たよ。倉庫っぽい。え？カセットテープがいっぱい。何ここ？初見です。マジで初見です。え？何？
Okay, this is day number 295. Tape number... I don't even know. I've lost track. Nothing feels real anymore. The longer I study this bucket, the less sense anything makes. The sheer euphoria I feel every time I pick it up. No matter how many times I've done it, it's always the same feeling.
え、バケツホラーもしかして。
And the emptiness in my chest when I set it down. It doesn't make sense. There's no explanation for it.
怖い怖い怖い怖い。
I still haven't figured out why I see the world so differently when this bucket is in my arms. Why everything feels so... What do I do with this treasure? I can monetize it.
え？
Yes. It's unthinkable the amounts of money people will pay for even just an hour with the
カセッ
bucket.
トテープ近くない？
This is my golden ticket. But I have to be careful. because as soon as this gets
あれ、
out,
私の背
there's
中
going
も
to be
狙
a
われてます
target
よ。
on my back. Even now, I don't know who might be trying to get. What's that? Who's there?
スタンリーも死ぬんじゃね？ ガンボラータ？え？怖っ。怖っ。
Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
どうしよっかな。戻ったけどあんま意味なかったんですよね。
And so the two of them detoured through the maintenance section and walked straight ahead to the opposite door.
こっち行ってみよっか。
Oh, good Stanley. I'm glad you found your way here.
Eh?
I knew you'd find this place eventually.
あ、そうなん？わー、キモい。
You see, your friends and I are concerned for you, Stanley. We've come together here because we care about you very much. It's this bucket you're carrying around everywhere. The bucket isn't even from the original Stanley Parable. It's just sequel content. We're the ones that matter, Stanley. Classic characters from the first game, like the adventure line and the broom closet. Because that's what fans want from a sequel. They want more of their favorite jokes, not this bucket that they've never seen before. Yes, I know I'm the one who gave you the bucket, but you're spending too much time with it. Don't you want another story involving the adventure line? We could make the adventure line go somewhere new. Yes, yes, that's what the fans want. Let's do it.
え？聞いてます。
Whee! Look at that wacky line. Who knows where it'll go off to next? Oh, and it played some silly music as well.
それにトレードマークつけてもなんかちょっと引くんですけど、まあいいや、行くか。うるせえ、うるせえ、うるせえ。うるさい。ミュートするぞ、こら。
Now this is what the Stanley Parable is all about. Don't you remember all those great jokes from the original
う
dialogue?
わ、やったわ、こういうの。
addicted to drugs and hookers.
Yes, it's as classic now as it was back then. Let's do it for the fans, Stanley. Let's give them more content exactly like this. But if we want to do that, you're going to have to give something up. Don't you get it, Stanley? We need to get rid of the bucket. That's why I'm very proud to introduce a brand new character. This is the Bucket Destroyer.
Huh?
I think it'll make a wonderful new addition to the rich lore of the Stanley Parable. True, it also was not in the original game, but it's such a well-fleshed-out character with so much personality that to me it already feels as though it's been part of the cast all along. Don't you agree?
で、出
Can
ら
you
れなかっ
guess
た。
what the Bucket Destroyer does? Surely you don't need me to spell it out for you. Go ahead now, Stanley. Say goodbye to the bucket, and then pop it into the machine when you're ready.
入れられないんだけど。
Now listen to me. It's crucial that you give it the bucket. I don't know what the Bucket Destroyer will do if it can't destroy your bucket. Destroying buckets is all it knows. That is its singular personality trait. Sure, I can hear you saying, how does a character with only one personality trait deserve to join the pantheon of beloved Stanley Parable characters? Well, you see, if you were to really explore the Bucket Destroyer, you would see that
Yeah,
its
buckets,
desire to crush buckets is so densely loaded with complexity and nuance that it's really like 10 personality traits. What other object in this game can you even say that about? The
Yeah,
broom closet? Certainly not. I wonder what sort of Bucket Destroyer merchandise the fans will be clamoring for after this. Okay, the Bucket Destroyer is getting very upset now. You'll have to hurry and feed it. We can't get back to the classic Stanley Parable characters like the Adventure Line or the Bucket Destroyer until you crush that damn bucket. Quickly now, the fans are waiting. Do it, the fans, Stanley. Give the fans what they want. Hurry and...
死んだ。バケツデストロイヤーが空舞ってる。
My prized creation. You had so much potential. We were going to do such marvelous things with you, tell such spellbinding stories about you. All of it squandered now. Goodbye, new friend. For the moment in time that you were here, you were magnificent.
で、バケツどこ行ったの？
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room to check on his co-workers. He never functioned well by himself and constantly needed support and guidance from others, so the thought of total solitude was terrifying to him.
一回ちょっとバケツ抜きでいってみようか。
When Stanley came to a set of two open doors, this was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it. It was okay. But eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left. Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago. Look, Stanley, I think perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. I'm not your enemy, really, I'm not. I realize that investing your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story has been about nothing but you all this time. There's someone you've been neglecting, Stanley. Someone you've forgotten about. What? Really? I was in the middle of something. Do you have zero consideration for others? Are you that convinced that I want something bad to happen to you? Why, I don't know how to convince you of this, but I really do want to help you, to show you something beautiful. Look, let me prove it. Let me prove that I'm on another miniature Stanley figurine. You know, there really must be a snappier name for these things. What about mini stands? Stanley figs? What about Stanlerines? Yes, I think I like that. Another Stanlerine under your belt.
Hey.
Now listen carefully, this is important. A soft wind blew outside and perhaps rain started, and if it did, it stopped shortly after. Stanley hoped that he would one day see weather. It takes a lot of humility to carry a bucket so magnificent. Stanley checked his ego and then proceeded onward. Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left.
右の道はだいたい行き終わったっぽいんで、ちょっと左行きます。ミーティングルーム？え？怖っ。There will be a reward for finding them all. Trust the completion instinct. なんか全部集めたらなんかもらえるに決まってんだろって切れてる。Nearby a fireplace. Private place for an important person. あ、なるほど。ある場所が書いてあるんだ。オッケー。あと3つ探すか。
Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's office.
ないな。ないね。あった。
Okay, I'm going back to the name of these little Stanley figurines, and now I'm torn between Stanlerines and Figlies. What do you think, Stanley? What name better encapsulates the intrinsic sense of happiness that you get from seeing a small number in the corner of your screen go up by 1? Let me sit on it. I'm sure it will come to me.
よし、戻って役員室行こう。 その前にトイレ。あった。
You're getting close now, Stanley. You've nearly gotten all of the Figler Anlarines. Very soon, you'll collect the last one, and then the first number will equal the second number, and that will be it. We'll be different people by then. Different in the sense that we used to have none of them, and now we have them all. You can't go back to when you had no Figler Anlarines. None of us can.
I've got the feeling money is for stealing, but not yours, and わかんない。とりあえずゲットしたんで役員室行こう。ここにはないね。
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Crushed by the weight of this revelation, Stanley may have broken down into an emotional dumpster fire if not for the soothing presence of the bucket. Even now, in his darkest of hours, did the bucket's warmth and guiding light pierce the dark clouds of confusion and chaos. It would be with him always. But Stanley guessed the correct code by sheer luck. Was it that the bucket knew all along? Was the bucket guiding him? Yes, this is certainly the most logical explanation.
ないなあ。とりあえずバケツ持っていくか。あと一個どこだろう。あった。
And there it is, the last Stiggly Wiggly. Savor this moment, Stanley. This is a real accomplishment. This is doing something just for the sake of doing it. Where so many people expect to be rewarded for the most trivial achievements, you've insisted that a job well done is its own reward. I would tell you that I'm proud of you for collecting them all, but that would be like a reward, and we can't have that. So, instead I'll just say, it's done. We're all done here. And now we can go to whatever the hell you were doing before you hunted for figurines.
はい。ということで続けようか。同じな気がするな。
The elevator raced downward, plummeting towards an unknown fate. It would be all Stanley could do to keep himself together, if not for the bucket. Soothing him, comforting him, reassuring that in this darkest moment of uncertainty, he would be all right. The bucket is here for you, Stanley. Everything will be fine.
同じだな。
Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through the large door that read, Mind Control Facility.
こっち行ってみて何もなかったら次のターンでこっち行きます。こっちはね、通常版は通常版でエンディングがあるんですけど、同じかどうかは若干気になる。じゃあパラボー2が何を用意してくれているのか見ようじゃないか。
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley and the bucket both wondered to themselves. The monitors jumped to life, and Stanley nearly dropped the bucket in shock. Everyone in the office was being videotaped, monitored like guinea pigs. The bucket had never seen anything like this, and it very nearly burst into tears as Stanley cradled it gently, reassuring it that everything would be fine. Was the bucket under the mind control facility's influence as well? Had the bucket been told to do things it didn't wish to do? What kinds of things does a bucket want to do or not want to do in the first place? These questions raced furiously in Stanley's feeble mind. No! He screamed into the bucket. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control, never! He squeezed the bucket tighter, his one friend in the entire world. At this point, he could trust no one except for the bucket. But here was the proof. The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions, happy or sad or content. Walking, eating, working, all of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he and the bucket would dismantle the control. Stanley and the bucket waited in blackness. Was it over? Yes, they had done it. Stanley and the bucket had defeated their greatest and darkest enemy, freed themselves from the tyrannical grip of the evil mind control machine. Freedom was now mere moments away. Excitedly, the two of them began to discuss the kind of life they wanted to live once they stepped through this massive door. The bucket wanted to learn to roller skate. Stanley wanted to sneeze in every country on Earth. Both of them wanted to begin watching a movie, any movie, but then stop it halfway through and begin watching it in reverse from the end. True, it was a simple life they envisioned, but it was one they'd lived together, with one another to lean on, to trust, to support.
Eh? Eh?
What? Wait.
Eh?
What was happening? Why had the door stopped?
なんで
Was Stanley and the bucket not about to be freed?
え
An unbearable silence filled the room, lingering in uncertainty, until finally the truth hit Stanley square in the face. This building did not want the bucket to leave. Even the facility itself recognized the incredible calming presence of the bucket, needed the soothing warmth of the bucket. Go to any lengths not to part with the bucket. No. Stanley can't leave this place. Not while he has such a precious bucket in his arms. Not while this building has anything to say about it. Stanley realized he would never again leave this very room. But at least he has the bucket. To be trapped eternally in darkness isn't really so bad, Stanley thought to himself. As long as I have my bucket with me, right? I'll be okay, won't I? Stanley gulped. Very soon now, he was about to find out.
バケツ真珠エンド。暗。
Stanley, I'm sorry, but I have to put a pause on things. It's those figurines, those figglers. I haven't stopped thinking about them since you nabbed every last one. Wasn't it just the most intrinsically fulfilling moment of your entire life? Didn't it fill you to the brim with inner richness? Yes, I know we're supposed to be telling a story, but won't you please indulge me with one more trip back to the memory zone? I would love nothing more than to revisit the figurines. Just one more time.
When Stanley found the collectibles. なんか全部集めたから持ってこいって言われた。直通だ。直通廊下がある。
Here's where it all began. The first collectible. Back then, we had no idea of how many of them we'd find. Sure, it said 6 right there on the screen, but how could we know for certain? We were so innocent. We'll never be like that again, Stanley.
怖っ。
And here was a second Stanlerine. You found this one all on your own, just by poking around in the warehouse. You did that, Stanley. I'll be honest. Back then, I had no faith in you to find any of them, let alone 6. But you continue to surprise me in all sorts of mundane, unremarkable ways. Okay, let's do a little quiz. Which of these rooms was the room you found your third mini Stan? Can you remember?
こっちじゃない？違う？ あ、合ってた合ってた。
No, 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 no. Under the stairs was the fourth place you found a figure.
あ、ごめん。
Not the third. Well, I guess perhaps I shouldn't be surprised. Memories like these are so precious and so cherished that they all just sort of blend together, don't they? You know what? If under the stairs feels like the third place you found a collectible, then who am I to go making judgments?
ごめん。間違って。
Let's see. What came next? Oh yes, we found a figly in this pink room.
いや、違
Oh,
うよ。
well, I can't actually say I remember being in this room, but it's here in the memory zone, so it must have happened.
違う違う。
This was the fifth mini stand, and this one was really something special. It was in the boss's bathroom. I remember it so clearly. In fact, because this one is particularly special to me, I made a little video to commemorate the occasion. Enjoy.
動画？ダサすぎる。
Takes you back, doesn't it? I spent a lot of time making that video, but it was 8 minutes I wouldn't have spent on anything else.
.次は何？
And then, Stanley, then we came to the last collectible, the final figurine, right here behind the boss's office. This memory is the most distinct and clear in my mind, perhaps because it was the one that happened more recently than all the others. Who can truly say how the mind works? All I know is that this is the moment where you picked up a figly and I thought to myself, yes, that's all of them. They're all collected. It was a moment unlike any other. Except for the other moments picking up figurines, which it was exactly like.
で、何が起きるんだい？
And then there was no more, because we've caught up to the present moment. Nothing left to do but move onward into the future. Goodbye, memory zone.
え、終わり？
No, 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 I'm not done. I'm not ready to move on.
Eh?
Stop the loading screen. Isn't
So-
there some way we can stay here, keep enjoying these figurines? Let's just go backwards. We'll do the memory zone again from the opposite direction. See how that feels.
え？もう一回やんの？
Okay, yes. The back of the boss's office. I remember this. I must say, of all the figurines we looked at in our initial tour of the memory zone, this one is the most distinct and clear in my mind. Let's keep going. I want more. And here's where I made that video. Don't you remember the video we watched?
また見んの？あ、早っ。もう終わった。
Yes, I love that video.
で？
Still don't remember the pink room, Stanley. Still no memory of this one. Good room, though. A solid room.
ここでもらった記憶はないね。
These really were a treat to hunt down. You know, if there had been any kind of reward for finding all of these, it really would have neutered the intrinsic joy of collecting them. I'm very glad we resisted the temptation. Next one.
残りは？ あ、こっちミスったからいけないのか。
This was our second Figley. Don't you remember? Yes, I remember it too. The past is truly a wonderful thing. Why does anyone ever choose to leave it? Keep going.
落ちそうで怖いな。
This is it, the very first one we found in the exhibit where I introduced you to the Figlarines. Oh, I want more memories, Stanley. I want to keep going. What else is there? What came before this?
ああ、スタンリーパラボー2の説明会場だ。
Look, it's the terrible new content that we were originally sold on. I remember hating it back then, but time does put a rosy filter on everything. In fact, I dare say I'm actually quite fond of it now. Look how much fun the past is.
Oh, yes, the two doors. Who could have forgotten that? A classic memory, this one.
ただいま。
And before everything else, there was your office. Is there anything else? Was there something that came before your office? There's something I feel I can remember. I can remember. Yes, I'm remembering something now.
Eh?
I remember before this whole story got started. Back then I was different.
Eh?
I used to make big decisions. I was passionate. I was skeptical. I weighed each decision with profound thoughtfulness. And then somewhere along the way, I stopped making decisions. I became lazy. And I came up with a character named Stanley to do my thinking for me. He would make the decisions. He would decide which way to go. I would cheer him on as he collected figurines for no reason. Why did I invent Stanley? Was I lonely?
え、ナレーターイコールスタンリーだったの？
Perhaps that's it. Perhaps I needed to imagine I had companionship. And Stanley really did make for a wonderful companion, even if he was a fiction. But I suppose it's grown old. I want to think for myself again. I want to go back to how it used to be. Yes, I can be on my own again. I can do it. I'll be stronger this time. I'll take care of myself. I don't need Stanley anymore. Oh, but he truly was so much fun to play with.
Eh?
You know what? Since we're in the memory zone, how about one more good memory? Let's go back just once and give Stanley one more run of the office, and then I'll retire him for good. I did enjoy telling his story so very much.
終わり？
Okay, here we go. This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through the large door that read Mind Control Facility. Although this passageway had the word escape written on it, the truth was that at the end of this hall, Stanley and the bucket would both meet a violent death. The door behind them was not shut. Stanley and the bucket still had every opportunity to turn around and get back on track. At this point, Stanley and the bucket were knowingly walking forward into a very painful death for each of them.
じゃあ死にに行くか。
As the machine whirred into motion and Stanley and the bucket inched closer to their demise, Stanley reflected on how meaningless the bucket's warmth and comfort had turned out to be. To be sure, it puts the mind and the soul at ease to embrace the bucket, but what use is a sense of ease when you're about to be crushed to death? This is what Stanley thought to himself, and he sort of kicked himself for wasting so much time carrying a bucket everywhere. Farewell, Stanley.
バイバイ。あ、
Farewell, Stanley, cried the narrator, as Stanley and the bucket were led helplessly into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, the bucket's life came to an end, as it was crushed violently to death.
あれお
It was a shame, the death of such a magnificent bucket. It's true that all buckets are radiant in their own way, but this one stood above the rest. It was a glorious bucket to behold.
おー、変わってる通常版と。あなたは今、知識の崖に立っています。人の精神はたびたびバケツのように空っぽになり、洞窟のような虚無感さえあります。はい。来たな、
Can
こ
you see
こ。
how arrogant it was for Stanley to take a bucket like this and to claim it for his own? Can you see the hubris that blinded him? Can you see that the bucket is far more noble than Stanley will ever be in his short
なんで
life?
バケツのためにスタンリーディスられなきゃいけないの？失礼な。地獄バケツ。数十カ国が戦争を引き落とした。すごいね。ストレスバケツ、解説なし。バケツにストレス全部突っ込んで蛇口でひなり出すと。へえ。洞窟の穴。人類誕生より前にバケツあったんだ。すごいね。
No man can own a bucket, and certainly not a bucket as dazzling to behold as this one. It is man who should kneel before the bucket.
ぶら下げられたバケツ。おー、無限穴だ。落ちるか。ヒュー。あ、落ちない。え、すごい。怖っ。酔った。戻るか。バケツだ。どこまで下がれるか。行き止まりっぽい。お。
But there is something we can do. Something we can do together, you and I, that will right this terrible
間違い
wrong.
を正す。なんだ？あ、僕だけ死ぬとか？
Let Stanley die. Let him
やっ
be
ぱり。
crushed by the machine. Don't reset the game. Don't give him another opportunity to run off with another beautiful bucket. We can save the world's buckets from their treatment as tools and implements if only we let Stanley die together. The bucket shall take its place as ruler, as leader, as commander of a new world, a new vision.
うおう。終わり？
Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's office.
ちょっとじゃあ最後に地下行ってみようかね。
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy.
通常版と似てるけどなんだ
Something
ろ
occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy.
う。あ
He looked down at the bucket in his arms. Am I crazy? He asked the bucket. The bucket returned his gaze, but said nothing at all. That's strange, Stanley thought. Usually the bucket is a source of guidance and wisdom for me in difficult times such as these. He held the bucket close, yet felt none of its familiar reassurance and comfort. And that's when Stanley realized, this isn't my bucket. It's just a normal, everyday bucket. Someone else's bucket, perhaps. How did I end up with someone else's bucket? This is all terribly wrong. Surely no good would come from this. Who knows what sorts of bizarre hallucinations Stanley might experience without the psychologically grounding presence of his
バケ
bucket.
ツがなくなっちゃった。
Indeed. Now he noticed that the rooms were repeating, which was, of course, very odd. And now he felt himself floating off the ground. Oh, gracious, he exclaimed. Without my bucket, I've gone truly mad. Where is it? I must find it. Far off in the distance now, he heard it, calling to him.
Stanley! Stanley, it's me, the bucket.
Could it truly be? He rushed forward from room to room, passing by one bucket
buckets
after
がい
the
っ
next.
ぱい。
None of them were his. None of them were his special bucket.
Come to me, Stanley. Find me.
He had to find the bucket. He had to return to his old friend. It was the only way to truly restore his sanity. And then suddenly, he froze dead in his tracks. He knew where the voice of the bucket had been coming from. The real bucket was inside of him all
どういうこと？
along. It was incredibly painful. Stanley doubled over in agony and blacked out.
え？バケツが貫通してたからだ。
This is the story of a woman named Mariella. Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, picked up her bucket of comfort and security, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town, talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. Right away, she knew what the problem was. This man had no bucket. Of course he'd gone mad, ranting and raving about a narrator describing all of his actions and how everything is predetermined and free will is an illusion and it's all just a video game. It could all have been prevented if only he'd taken his bucket with him. Perhaps he didn't even realize he'd forgotten his bucket at home in the first place. How cruel the world can be, Mariella thought, and she hugged her own bucket even tighter. But of course, she had no time for this. There were a myriad of confusing problems she would soon have to confront at work, for which her bucket would provide absolute guidance and total clarity on everything. Heck yes, she thought to herself, my life kicks ass. And she backflipped
私の
all the
人
way
生や
to
べえや
work.
は面白いね。さらばスタンリー。
And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human. But at the last second, the bucket jumped in and pressed the button to turn on the controls. Stanley gasped in horror. Had this been the bucket's plan all along? To take over the machine and claim the power for itself? How could the bucket have betrayed him like this? Stanley was prepared to throw the bucket away in disgust when suddenly an image appeared upon the enormous screen.
え？
Birds. Silly, silly birds. The control buttons became active again. Stanley flipped through one video of silly birds after another, and then it dawned on him. This wasn't a mind control facility at all. It was a facility for monitoring and surveilling silly birds all over the world. The mind controls were only a facade to disguise its true intentions.
あ、そうなの？
Had the bucket known this all along? Stanley marveled at the metal genius in his hands, the one who had pointed him towards this
鳥を監視
incredible
する施設？
Stanley and the bucket never found freedom because they spent the rest of their lives here in this place,
そうだ
living
ね。
through live streams of the silliest birds imaginable. Of all the possible paths his life could have taken, this one was surely the best. And Stanley was happy.
それはよかった。あと行ってないのはあの上か。
No, said the bucket. Don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift, yes. Good, said the bucket. Now ride the lift all the way to the top. There's something up there I need you to do.
But Stanley feared that any path he walked might lead to the separation of himself and the bucket, his dearest friend. So he threw himself to his death, that they might die in one another's arms. How deeply touching. How long was I sitting there? Stanley wondered to himself. Minutes? Days? Centuries? Did something crucial happen while my senses were turned? He made a note to be more careful with time from now on.
What new mysteries lay in store for our bucket-loving heroes today? Let's find out.
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his... This was not the correct way to the meeting room, but Stanley had felt the bucket calling to him, telling him that the employee lounge was simply the place to be. And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? No, never mind. The bucket was wrong. Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
No, said the bucket. Don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift. Good, said the bucket. Now ride the lift all the way to the top. There's something up there I need you to do.
Stanley did not question why or how this bucket was speaking to him. It should have alarmed him, of course, because buckets can't talk. But Stanley chose not to think about this obvious fact. He was firmly convinced that the bucket had spoken to him, and he unthinkingly did whatever the bucket asked.
In here, said the bucket. Go into this dark room over here.
Stanley once again obeyed blindly.
入るよ。え、
Now pick up the phone,
はい。
said the bucket.
電話出
Pick
ま
up
す。
the phone, and it will take...
電話出たよ。
This is the sad story of a man named Stanley and his bucket. Once upon a time, I gave Stanley a bucket because I thought he was lonely and could use a friend. And then, very distressingly, he began to believe the bucket could speak to him.
おしゃれだ。通常版の時よりずっとおしゃれ。僕を君と戻すために L を押して。
The Stanley Parable Reassurance Bucket was merely meant to provide the comforting glow of companionship. It doesn't literally talk and give you orders. Whatever Stanley is hearing the bucket say to him is just in his head.
僕を君の家へ連れて帰るために P を押して。はい。
Lately, I've been concerned about him. Wouldn't you be concerned as well? To see him delusional like this, obsessing over an inanimate metal object? I want to say something to him, but I don't know how I can convince him. I don't know if he'll listen to me.
あ、バケツがあった。本題へ戻るために Y を押して。
Well, I'll try anyway. Stanley, can you hear me? Listen to me. It's just a bucket. It can't think. It can't talk. All it will ever truly do for you is effectively transfer a liquid from one location to a different location. That's it. It doesn't do anything else.
え、病んでるじゃん、スタンリー。
You see, he's not listening. He's still taking orders from the bucket. You know, once upon a time it was me he took orders from. Me he trusted and listened to. Now all he cares about is his awful bucket. This stupid hunk of metal.
バケツ対ナレーター。君の人生で僕以外全員を無視するために R を押して病んでんな。
It's sad, but I suppose he doesn't need me anymore. From now on, he's just going to cling to this bucket, this cold, empty bucket, this sort of shiny bucket. Well, I'll give it this. The bucket does
ナ
have
レ
a
ーター
nice
も病んで
shine
る。
to
やばい
it.
やばい。洗脳されてる。僕が実在するって信じてるんだよね、スタンリー。家へ帰るために Y を押して。はい。ただい
Yes, I
ま。
suppose on closer inspection that it doesn't quite look like your average hardware store
もうダメだ。
bucket. It's just a little more, what am I trying
ナ
to
レーター
say?
も落ちてやがる。
Sturdier, more capable of transporting liquid. Like it would be better at moving an amount of water from one room to another.
P を押すと、この同じ日を何度も何度も僕と繰り返せるよ。
Oh my god, what am I saying? Better at carrying water from room to room. It's a bucket. It's literally just a bucket.
あ、僕監
Why
禁
do
さ
I
れちゃ
feel
った。
some need to point out the ways in which it's so much more than just a regular bucket?
家へ仕事へ、家へ仕事へ、家へ帰るために V を押せ。とうとう命令口調。
Oh no. I'm having feelings for the bucket. No, 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 no. What's going on? Why do I want to be with the bucket? Hear what the bucket has to say. Do anything it asks. What's wrong with me? I don't understand. Perhaps if I had the bucket, this would be
バケツと
less
共寝をするという
confusing.
ことか。
Yes. The bucket could tell me what to do in this troublesome situation. Stanley, give me the bucket. Give it to me. Give me the bucket, Stanley. I need it. Give it to me now. Give it or I'll...
ナレーターに謀反。ナレーターが謀反を起こした。戻ろう、スタンリー。うん。怖っ、ナレーター。
Oh, Stanley, can you feel it? The broom closet. It wants the bucket. You can feel that, can't you? The aura of jealousy? It's as clear as day. This broom closet believes it deserves the bucket. I can really feel it now. It's a bucket. It belongs in a broom closet. That's what the broom closet is trying to say here. It's supposed to go with the other cleaning supplies. Good for you, Stanley. Don't give in. Don't hand over the bucket. I know how hard it must be, given the pressure that the broom closet is putting on your shoulders right now, but you have to be strong. This is your bucket. This is your companion and lifelong friend. You can't hand it over. Oh, no. We're getting into name-calling now, it seems. Is this how low the broom closet has sunk, that it has to resort to this stream of petty insults simply in order to get you to hand over the bucket? Stanley, I never liked this broom closet for a variety of reasons, but even this is worse than I had imagined. And wait, now the broom closet has the gall to imply that you and the bucket are not truly deep and lasting friends? That your relationship is purely superficial and convenient? That your life is so banal and meaningless that you'd feel the same sort of kinship towards any inanimate object which happened to lay in your path in an even partially enticing manner? Well, I never. Go on, Stanley. Lay into it. Really tell the broom closet off for its demeaning comments. Expand on the wide variety of experiences you and the bucket have shared together. Go through each of them point by point. Share your journal entries detailing the rich emotional landscape of your feelings for the bucket as they have changed and evolved over the years. Let him have it. Okay, I've got you something which I think will help settle this debate once and for all. Here we go. There. Now it's settled. No more debate, no more discussion. Take a hike, broom closet, with all your meandering philosophical diatribes about the nature of cleaning supplies and their relationship to broom closets in the natural order of things. All right, I've got a second sticker back here, and I'm going to slap it on as well because I think it's appropriate. You see? I feel that it works because the sticker is also a bucket. That way, if you're ever unsure whether the thing you're holding is a bucket or not, you can look down at this sticker and say to yourself, ah, it's a bucket. There really is a wide variety of applications for this sticker. You know what? I could take the name calling and the dismissal of your kinship with the bucket, but now the broom closet is just giving us the silent treatment. And to be honest, I'm sick of the pettiness on display. You can stay here all you like, but I've had it with this impetulant room of cleaning supplies. Easily the most childish such room I've ever been in. I'll see you outside, and we can get on with the story about you and your bucket.
一通り遊んでまいりまして、最後に残すところこちらとなりました。なんかまだねエンディングあるとは思うんですけど、だいぶ疲れてきたので最後これを入力してエンディング回収一旦ここで終わろうと思います。では押そうか。こっちインプットリシーブド。 Welcome Stanley to Heaven。キモ。あ、ボタンだこれ全部。これ全部押したらなんかあるかな。ちょっと頑張ってみるんでしばしお待ちくださいませ。あ、これ色戻るわ。ダメですね。わかりません。ということでこのイカれたエンドで終わろうと思います。まあちょっとだいぶバケツ色がね、2の方は濃かったですけど、こんな感じで終えたいと思います。天国にはバケツは一緒に行けないんだね。はい、じゃあスタンレー君一人で最後天国に旅立ってもらって終わろうと思います。これ以上続けたら頭おかしくなりそうなんでここで終わります。お付き合いいただきましてどうもありがとうございました。また別の動画でよろしくお願いいたします。